All right, welcome everybody. We are here with our live audience of looks like 60, 70 people. So welcome to this webinar on the effective small church. A couple of technical things to just kind of go over first off. Some of you are just logging in right now and you're trying to figure out the software and you're trying to figure out what you need to do. I'm doing this from memory. Maybe Andy, you want to give me a refresher? Is it what are some controls on? They're on the right side, as I recall.
Yeah. So on the right side of their screen, they'll see a box to ask questions and to chat, and we'll be taking questions through the question box.
Okay. So on the right side, if you didn't hear him, there's a box for asking questions and also for chat. Either of those you can enter in. You might want to go ahead and check that out just to start with by putting your cursor in there, typing something like, say hi to Andy, and tell him that he's a good-looking guy and he's got a Red Sox beard already ready to go. So that's the technical piece. Also, if you have any kind of issues with, sound or video, you can't see us, or you can hear us, or you can other way around. Go ahead and enter that in. All of those questions will go right to Andy, and he'll do his best to answer them. The format's pretty much going to be, we're going to talk for a little bit, and there'll be a chance for you to ask questions. You're not interrupting, so at any point you have a question, go ahead and just type it in there. You can send it, and we'll get to it. We'll go about an hour, and should be fun. So I am really pleased to welcome Pastor Julie Reuning-Scherer and Pastor Deneen, who are two pastors in our synod, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a second. And I want to just say a word about how this all came to be. As I've been traveling and visiting congregations in the New England Synod, one of the things that I heard was particularly from some of our congregations in the northern tier, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine area, is they said, well, why don't you ever do anything for small churches? So I just kind of logged that, because we do a lot of things for churches, and most of our churches are small. I would say probably about 80% of them worship under 70 on a Sunday on average. And so I got thinking about, well, what makes for a really healthy, strong, small church? And having visited both of these congregations, where Pastor Julie and Pastor Ann are, I immediately thought of the two of them to come, and because they pastor congregations that are small in that definition of worshiping under 70, but they're vital, they're effective, they're healthy. Examples would be in both places you go, at the sharing of the peace, it takes a while. And both places have children that are involved in worship. And I remember, Julie, in your church, the Sunday I was there, you had like a third or fourth grader was the assisting minister on that day. I thought it was a great thing. And Anne, I was there, well, I happened to be at this Christmas pageant, right, which of course had lots of kids involved and so forth. And just lots of dynamism, lots of energy. People clearly like each other. And so I thought, you two would be just perfect for this. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and your church and how long you've been there and general introduction.
I'll go first. I'm Julie Reuning-Scherer, and I pastor Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Newington, Connecticut. I grew up in a congregation that was, I'd say, medium-sized in Columbus, Ohio. Shout out to all those people who are watching. Hi, Mom. And during my college years, I was a member of a tiny American Baptist church in Oberlin, Ohio. And that was really kind of my first experience of small church. And I'm going to reference some of my experiences there because they did shape me in thinking about what's valuable in the community at that size and the flexibility that's really available at that size. I came to Connecticut and was an intern and served as associate pastor at Emmanuel in Manchester, Connecticut. Served as an interim at Salem in Naugatuck, Connecticut, which has now become the, I want to say Faith, or was
Grace.
it Grace? Sorry everyone. The New Grace in Naugatuck, result of a consolidation. And I've already said where I'm presently serving, so.
Good.
Thanks. I'm Ann Deneen, and I serve St. Paul Lutheran Church in Gloucester, Massachusetts. It was my first call. I'm still there. I've been there, this is my 11th year. And before I was a pastor, I taught and did campus ministry. And that's shaped my way of being a pastor of a small church too. So the church I currently serve was a kind of ethnic group, Finnish church that was strongly identified with the Finnish community on Cape Ann, and it has shifted and changed throughout its 100 or so years. And recently we are not so much the little Finnish church anymore, but we have people from all different kinds of faith backgrounds, and it's grown and changed.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. So let's just say, we'll lay out a couple of things for everybody in terms of small churches. In the New England Synod, I would say about 80% of our congregations are small. They're worshiping around 70 or under. Yeah, the other thing that I say when I go around the Synod, lately people have been asking me about what's the state of the Synod kind of thing. And I do say that we have 180, roughly, congregations. 40 are extremely fragile. And then we have 40 that are very healthy. And then we have 100 in the middle that are trying to figure out which way they're going to go. And because we have so many small churches, that's kind of who we are as a synod. I think we have maybe 10 congregations that have 2 pastors. You know, for the most part, it's one pastor in a church. And each of you came to congregations that have changed over the time. So what was it like when you got there, Anne? I'll start with you. What was it like when you got there, and what has changed that you've seen, both numerically and in terms of the dynamics of the place?
Well, when I came, we were worshiping around 60, I'd say, and we've grown in that way. But I came in after a very good interim, and that was one of the points I wanted to make. St. Paul had a decision to make at the end of in 1999-2000 about how they wanted to go and who they wanted to be. And in their interim period between the previous pastor and me, they made a strong commitment to staying a full-time ministry, and a strong commitment to addressing their stewardship and their financial support, and a strong commitment to outreach and to community in a way that they would keep them viable. They really wanted to stay open, and they wanted to stay lively. So they reimagined themselves with their interim, and then when they hired me, it was a match to kind of what they had imagined to some extent. And that was a point, I talked to my council about this last night, and one of the points they made was thinking about who's matched up, to really think about that match of pastor and community, and where the two visions come together. So I thought that was a really nice thing. So in the course of my time there, I really had a map of who they wanted to become. They wanted to become involved in the wider community, which we certainly have. They wanted to become financially stable, which we have. They wanted to strengthen their family ministry, which we have. And they wanted to feel like they were alive and flourishing, which we are. Now, there are changes I can't make, like how we do communion. It's still the same as when I got there. So you pick your areas of change.
Right.
But the things that they wanted to achieve, we've really gone and done. And I didn't know this when I got there. I had done years of work in American disabilities. After the ADA, my job before I came to St. Paul was working with college students and professors to create a situation of equality for students with disabilities, physical and learning disabilities. When I got to St. Paul, our building was completely inaccessible, and they had been talking about it for many years, that they needed to change it. So I didn't know I was going to be doing that kind of work again. And I thought, in the economy of God, nothing gets wasted. All those years of like knocking on professors' doors and saying, this is what the student needs. You have to take things out of the aisle. They need the place for their wheelchair. It was amazing. And it all came into play in trying to help get us handicapped accessible, which we are. Which brings me to one of the points that my council and I talked about last night was part of the excitement of being a small community is because you can build enough trust to take bigger risks. And they took a huge risk. Just before the economy went under, we had committed to a building project, and we kept on, and we're doing it. We've built on, we've changed the building, and we're able to meet our financial obligation with that. That was a huge risk for them. It was a huge risk to believe that they would have enough people who would need it, and we're so thrilled. But so that was a physical change, but it's a marker, I think, of the spiritual shift that they made towards risk-taking. And
interesting. Good. That gives us a little snapshot. And Julie, you came, and there's been kind of a change there. I remember being there on that Sunday, and lots of...
I'd probably point out that you've been at your church, Ann, 11 years?
Yes.
Yeah. I've been in my call for 3.5.
Okay.
So, but this congregation in Newington has had long pastorates, and I think that can be handy. Some small churches have 3 to 5 year pastorates, and I think it's really great when you can really build that trust you're talking about if you do have some pastorates that are longer. So I'm not thinking about going anywhere, so I'm anticipating sticking around so I can perhaps build that kind of trust too. I think we're on our way. When I started 3.5 years ago, we were worshiping in the 50s, the lower 50s, and now we're mid-60s. So I would say that within 2 years, we had gained a lot of new members. There was quite a bit of growth in the first 2.5 years, so that on any given Sunday morning, we had a third of our congregation, a third of our 60, were totally new to the congregation in the past couple of years. So that shifted the dynamics of the congregation just by having that influx of new people. They were really ready for change. They kind of had a pent-up desire for change when I came. My predecessor had announced retirement 2 years prior to the actual retirement. So they had that sort of handing off of ministry from him to them, a natural denouement, which is perhaps longer than some interims. And then they had a 6 months interim besides. So by the time I got there, they were really ready to move forward. And it was kind of really joyful, actually, because they were just so excited about everything we were doing together. It was, yeah. So their desire to make changes, I think, then carried us through to be able to do some things that were necessary, which was, first of all, really sharing the ministry among all the people of the congregation. There was a lot that the pastor had done. And by necessity, I think there had been a case of a real kind of falling apart of clergy trust before my predecessor, so the 2 ministries ago. So his job was really to be kind of the stability and the glue, and that was great for that time, but by the time I arrived, they were really to take on pieces that he had done. And so that ministry of all believers is something that I was really ready to share. And feel pretty strongly that our role as ministers is not to be the paid professional Christian, but rather to share that ministry and clue everyone else into the ways in which we can share this and hopefully find out what their gifts are so that that can happen. So I'd say that was a big piece and continues to be a big piece is how can we share this ministry? What are the pieces that need to be accomplished both business-wise and ministry-wise and make that happen?
Now, one of the things that we've called this the effective small church, and we were talking before about what is an effective small church. And I know you had conversations with your council, but also you were thinking about this beforehand. When you hear effective small church, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I'm thinking that there needs to be some liveliness in the people themselves, some excitement, some change and growth among the people, so that there isn't just a sense that we've arrived. You know, it might not be numerical growth necessarily, but some new challenge. Perhaps your words about risk-taking would be another way to say it, but some way in which there's an edge that's being sharpened just a little bit.
Do you think Can you think of an example of where you see that in your congregation?
Well, right now we're considering a new ministry, and I think this represents a big step for us. We've done a lot of social ministry that's been kind of at an arm's length, you know, collecting things, giving them away. Now we've ventured into the soup kitchen to serve. And in the past, the congregation had a very hands-on kind of ministry, but it's 25 years in the rear view. So the ministry we're considering is one that's run by the Interfaith Hospitality Network, Family Promise.
We do that.
You do that.
Yeah, we do.
They do that. You house homeless families in your church for 1 week at a time, 4 times a year. And it's just, there aren't any affiliates in Connecticut, but they are over 180 of them around the country. And so we'd have up to 14 people sleeping in our church for a week at a time, 4 times a year. So that would be entirely different for us to cook a meal, eat with them, play with their kids, rearrange our dinky little space. Yeah, so it's really, I think the advantage for us is that it's really hands-on. It's really contact with people. And I think they'll get so jazzed from it. But it also represents additional costs and wear and tear in the building and a lot of questions. So we're finding ourselves kind of moving through that and thinking that through. So I do think that is, you know, even if we don't decide to become a host congregation, that the conversation itself, considering the new ways that the Spirit is calling us, that is an area of growth for us.
Good example.
That is a really good example. And we're not a host congregation, we're a support congregation. And Family Promise came to the North Shore in the last year, and it took us a while to think about it and talk about it, but it was an easy decision in the end because it was obvious, well, of course we can do this. But then, you know, it takes some organizing and some time, and it's a well-run organization, so it was a lovely ministry to move into, and has been really rewarding. So I hope you guys do it. It's really good.
We're praying about it.
But that's one of the risks. That's one of the things of being committed to being more involved in the community.
Yes, and that was something they asked of me as well. Besides just doing more stuff, which they wanted from me when I came. Not for me to do more stuff, but to help them to do more stuff. But also to be more involved in the community. So we continue to work on that as well.
Interesting, yeah. Well, you said something earlier about risk-taking and the advantage of being a small church. And risk-taking. How do they go together?
Well, for me,
I always thought of small churches as like, no, we don't want to do anything.
No, actually, they're pretty lively.
Okay.
And I would agree with Julie about effective having to do with liveliness. And one of the practical pieces is just simple viability, which I mentioned earlier. We were talking. Just being viable in terms of numbers and finances was something St. Paul had to face, you know, as I said, about 12 years ago. And having made the commitment to wanting to be viable, then building towards just viability, but they moved so far beyond that. By risk-taking, the people there in a small community, you have a chance to really get to know each other and to understand who's going to do what, where, when, how, who will step up, who will take this piece, who has gifts for that piece, and it gives you the opportunity to be really known, and in that, really trusted. So that when we do take a risk, we've built some trust around it, and I think that's one of the gifts of it. I feel like being able to take a risk rests on having the capacity to trust both God in the process, but also each other as a community. And I think they have that. So that was something that I know about serving in that context with a small church. You have time and energy and space and just I think the conditions that create for strong bonds of trust over time. And I think that's a great plus.
Absolutely.
You really know each other. And we were talking last night in the council, part of that viability is you have a chance to be really who you are. To one of the council members said you have a chance to feel and to speak of what you're feeling and then to heal. So there's a quality of honesty that you can develop in a smaller place. That was their feeling. And I myself have been in a lot of churches of many, many sizes in a lot of contexts, and in fact, a lot of denominations, and maybe even a lot of religions. But, you know, because I'm curious, and I want to go visit communities. So I feel like for myself, it's a good, lively world to learn what it means to follow Jesus in the smaller place, because you can get attention.
I have something to add too about the risk-taking. I think that smaller congregations really use their resources wisely, in the sense that you have fewer people, so you don't have a lot of people who are deadwood, I guess is the word that's coming to me, but people who are just receiving rather than also making a real commitment to using their gifts and being present on a regular basis. And I think that goes hand in hand with the fact that in small church, you don't have so many cadre of people. Everyone makes a difference.
Every
like
person.
you notice when that
so
family of 5 is not there.
That so matters.
You know, you miss people, and so you take seriously every person, no matter how old or young or how physically able or not, whether they're in their right mind or not, whatever their political persuasion. You look for ways to utilize everybody and draw them all in because you know them, and because you just need everyone. Everybody is known and loved. One of the things I loved about this book, I brought my book, The Indispensable Guide for Smaller Churches by David R. Ray, is that he lays out some biblical stories that connect with small church. And he points out about how in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, in the body of Christ image that emerges there, that it's about the interdependence of all these body parts on one another, and that I hadn't really thought about how these body parts kind of need to know each other in order to depend on one another. So I really thought that image of the body was a good connection to what the small church has to offer, in addition to a number of other biblical sources that he uses. But I
one
love
of the
that.
things I'm hearing both of you say, though, in the midst of this is you're focused on the positive of who's there, as opposed to who's not here.
That's true.
And it because what are the gifts gathered around the table that we have? Whereas so often the mentality can be, well, we can't do that because we don't have that. And instead, you're both saying, well, but what we do have is these people.
We ought to share this book.
This is a great book. We both like it. It's called The Great Permission, and it's a kind of asset-based approach to thinking about ministry, which is exactly what you just said. You look at what you have and what's coming out of what you have. And I think it's reality-based, because who's not there is not real. Right. It's a fantasy. But who's in front of you is what is real, and it's what you have and what you can work with and what we can work with together. That's another piece about small church. I think it's very grounded in what's real. I mean, it's not a lot of pretentiousness, but you should speak more about that.
Yeah. I think you summed it up very well. I've used this in bigger church at Emmanuel Manchester. It was helpful there, but it's really been great for small church. Really great.
Questions?
We have a few, actually quite a few. They've piled up. Do you correlate the theology of missional church to an effective small church?
Well, I'm not gonna try to parse that because I think it's a huge question, but I would say yes. Not parsing it. I would say that the sense of mission to the community and to the wider world is critical to the liveliness of St. Paul. We really have a commitment to that, and sometimes we stumble in realizing it. Sometimes we're just trying to figure things out as we go, but they want to be a church that's open to the world and has far-reaching effect. They do. And so I would say they sense themselves that way. Okay. They certainly feel the mission to the local community in a huge way. So yes.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things that keeps a sense of mission is one of the things that keeps small church from being parochial.
Right.
Because you really can get really comfy with all the people that you know and show up because it's kind of clubby. And if you're rather challenged with connecting to the community and having meaningful ways to connect beyond yourself, such as sounds like Family Promise and other things are for your congregation, that really makes a difference.
Good. All right. I'm glad they got that question because I'm still trying to parse that in my head.
What is the status of attendance in your Sunday schools? Is it stable, growing, lower in numbers?
When I came, there were 3 children, and there are about 15 potentials, and I think we had 14 registered. we have a challenge about getting people there weekly. Nobody else has that challenge. So
it's
just yours.
Church.
Only church.
Only
Because
church.
everybody else comes all the time.
So we grew to having 2 rooms of Sunday school, the lower pre-reading group and the reader group, and really kind of fabulous curriculum for both. I'm really pleased at that. And a group of teachers that rotated in and out. So it's all set up pretty well. But we're just challenged to actually get our kids there as often, and I'm as guilty as the next.
Because you have 2 children.
I have 2 children and 2 churches. My husband's also a professional. So our children are in church, but they're often at my husband's church instead of mine. So we have probably about 6 kids weekly, maybe 8.
Ours has fluctuated through the years, and I find we average between 25 and 35 at any given time. On paper, we have steady attendance of around 20 to 25, I would say.
That's great.
No, it's very solid, and they have a sweet Sunday school, and we're one of the last Sunday schools on Cape Ann.
Okay.
That's functioning, and we love it, and we try to really be dedicated to our children. I mean, other people do, but we've kept the hour before church. We have the children in church. We try to hold on to them, and the people who come find their way in sometimes through the Sunday school. It's a really sweet program.
Do you have more than 1 classroom?
We have 3 classes
Through grade?
up through. I guess they're 8th right now.
Oh,
I'm going to get a confirmation class next year. So we do confirmation. Probably they'll be in confirmation for 2 years, and then there'll be a space in the next group.
Yes, that's how we handle it too.
Yeah. So and the Sunday school, I would say, is one of the strong points of St. Paul. And I remember when I first started working in churches, the people talked about one of the ways the churches grow, and of course this has been borne out in research, is working with families, doing family ministry, and having a strong Sunday school. But that was 15 years ago. Right. Now, who knows what it's going to be like today, because things are changing so much.
2 things I want to say. One is both of you are very intentional about including children in worship.
Yes.
That worship is clearly you are welcome in church. And as we were talking at dinner, short of the kid that just loses it on the 4th pew and starts screaming, there's a little bit of a cacophony of kind of noise.
Little noises everywhere.
Yeah, but
peepings.
People embrace that, and people, welcome that. And you're both very intentional about involving children in leadership roles. The other thing is, I just want to give a little plug for a different kind of model of Sunday school, which is Our Savior Lutheran Church in Thomaston, Connecticut, where a couple of years ago they decided Sunday morning education was not working for any ages, adults, teens, confirmation, children. And Wayne Gollenberg, basically, it's been a long time, they looked at it, and what they came up with is what they call Tuesday night Sunday school. Which I love the title, because the title tells you what it is. Which is basically they do a potluck meal, and then there's an intergenerational, so it's families and kids as an alternative model. And so now on Sunday morning they do fellowship and worship, and that's it. Other questions?
And while we're on the topic of curriculum in Sunday school, we've had a couple of people ask about what the curriculum is at both of your churches. If you could kind of talk about that.
Yes, we're using Augsburg Fortress Spark for the younger class, lectionary based. So it was great on Sunday. I had a picture of the road to Emmaus, and even the little preschooler knew the story just by looking at my picture. So he had been so well prepared by the Sunday school Spark lectionary. It was pretty great. And then our older classes is using Connect, which has got a little DVD, and it's for tweens. And I'm really enjoying teaching that Bible overview. I love teaching Bible, so I'm really glad to rotate in among the teachers and teach Bible overview with Connect.
Okay, so you teach Sunday school sometimes.
I kind of do everything,
Right.
So
as
some
part of being a small church pastor,
It is It is. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's a little much, but I
Do
also
you do boiler
enjoy it.
work also?
I did meet with the inspector, but I have to call my property person because I don't know any of the answers to those questions.
Right. Do you shovel the snow?
I have never shoveled the snow.
Okay. All right.
I've scattered salt.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And do you open up and lock up on Sundays?
I often unlock 2 doors of the 3, and I always check 2 of the doors every Sunday.
Right.
Yeah.
I just point that out because that's a reality of being a pastor in almost all of our churches. And what about you?
For curriculum, we use the Spark, Augsburg Fortress Spark curriculum, and then, but we use that with all of the classes, and sometimes we'll create our own. We do intergenerational weeks at the beginning of each month. We do something with all the classes together. At the beginning of a season, we might do a class with grown-ups too together. It depends.
I'd like to just pick up on that piece of intergenerational, because I think given the smallness of the community, you have a lot more opportunity for that kind of work. You just don't have affinity groups that are viable, generally speaking, in a smaller community, so you have those overlaps, and I think that's really kind of fun. At our Lenten meals, we get maybe 25, and that's a good percentage of our worshiping congregation. And so you'll have little Sage sitting with Bob, who's 80, and a number of other people, and she's not even sitting with their family, but they get so jazzed out of sitting with a kid, and then maybe with another young parent, and then, these generations mixing up, people just love that. They love it.
And how rare it is in our culture anymore to have that kind of intergenerational interaction. We don't see that very much anymore.
It's one of the few places where the generations really connect meaningfully. That's a great gift.
Before we go to the next question, teachers for Sunday school, because the question was about curriculum, but I've always felt like curriculum is maybe 25% of what happens, and 75% is the person in that room. How do you recruit Sunday school teachers? How does that happen?
Well, there's a little panic every year.
Yeah.
We always have to deal. That came up in our council meeting, is that you're always kind of, we talked about, I think you said opportunities and challenges. Challenge of a small church is personnel, and not having people burn out because too many people are doing this, stuff over and over. So we tend to try to find people who look like they might want to teach Sunday school. Generally, we talk to family members. That starts, maybe a year out if we know someone's going to not be teaching. So it's a little bit of cultivation and also a strong hope and some anxiety. So generally someone will step up who has a connection already with the Sunday school, which I want to say everything's about relationship. It's all relational. If people have good experiences and good relationships, they're more likely to volunteer around things like that.
I'd say prayer.
Yes, I forgot that. We do pray too.
Because when I came, there was a really lovely parishioner who was teaching Sunday school during church twice a month. But it wasn't her first gift, this is something she did out of love, but it really wasn't her ministry. And, I'm praying about Sunday school because it is critical.
It is,
and 2 teachers joined the congregation.
Nice.
Two school teachers.
2 school teachers, 2 different families with women who were school teachers. And actually there's more educators out there who are not teaching. They're doing other stuff, but... and now the 3 of us, the 2 teachers and myself, we typically teach the Connect class, the older, and then we have some other people who are also, they're not professional teachers, but they're parents, and they've been through the younger years, so they feel confident to teach the younger class. So that works out.
Yeah.
Cool. Another one?
And you mentioned burnout. We've actually had a couple of questions about it. How do you help members of a smaller church combat burnout? And then a separate question along the same lines. We have members who have done tasks and run committees for years who are getting tired of doing so. The newer people seem hesitant to step up and take on these tasks and committees. How do you empower an effective changing of the guard?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, if you have something to say.
I have a couple things. With the second question,
Repeat the question.
Maybe repeat the question, changing the guard.
Yeah.
Changing the guard question.
because you don't have
Right.
the newer people seem hesitant to step up. So how do you empower an effective changing of the guard to get fresh faces in?
Well, okay, so here's a really interesting problem, because sometimes even though people say they would like to let go of things, it's very hard for them to let go of things. So part of that is really thinking through what it means to shift out of that role. And one of the things that happened in St. Paul is we don't have a committee structure anymore in the way that people, and I got that advice from a former pastor who had gone through that process in his church, and they just let go of the committee structure, which meant they let go of the anxiety around finding new committee members, and we became very much around tasks and teams. Now there's things that happen at St. Paul every year, and some of the same people do those, but gradually new people are incorporated. But it is very hard for new people to move in on something, and I've heard younger and newer members say to me, we don't want to step on anyone's toes. So I might say that to some of the members who have been doing, I hope you guys are listening, have been doing the same things for years, that one of our members, who was a wonderful man, said they won't step in till we step back. And not everybody actually gets that. And it's a hard thing to step back from that kind of role. So the good news is that we're thinking more and more in terms of helping new people come into it, letting go of things that we might not want to do anymore. I mean, just because you've done something, if there's not someone stepping up to it, maybe it's the end of the lifespan of that particular thing. So, you know, and we have had that experience. We made a decision not to do a mission thing we'd been doing for 5 or 6 years because there wasn't anyone to come forward. Actually, we'd done it for 7 or 8 years. There wasn't a new person who wanted to take the convening of that, so we just let it go. So that, you have to nuance that, I think, the honest answer to that, and you might need to have conversations about what it means to let go of that role very directly, in a loving way altogether, and I think that can be dicey sometimes. And you're nodding your head.
No, I'm just thinking of another subject that's going to relate to that I want to talk about later, but I want to hear your answer too.
Yeah, I think it's similar, that to not be afraid about having some holes.
Yes.
I mean, we're small churches. We're not going to do everything, but they've done it in the past. So it seems so egregious to no longer do this ministry. And some, you know, like I'm thinking about stewardship. You know,
That's a good example.
You need to have some kind of stewardship effort. But when I came, that's a skill set that I had because I was consultant while I was on leave from call for a while. So I just said, let me run it for this year. I'll do this because my leader was really tired. Go ahead, you don't need to lead this thing. Let me try something new. And that was okay. And then after a year, having seen that I was able to recruit some other folks to do it differently, you know, to have a totally new approach, then he was okay about stepping back because he could see that some other people were stepping in. He really had been hanging on only because it was essential and he knew it, and because no one else seemed to be able to, they didn't think they could fill his shoes, and he just didn't want to have no one doing it.
Yeah.
So this relates to a question that I want to ask. How do you know when is it time to be big in the church and when is it time to be small? And what I mean by that is, you know, that story you just told about stewardship, you sensed that this was a time for me to take leadership, to take charge, to be big, to be bold, but yet then there are other times when it's important for you to be small and let other things. How do you both work that? I know we didn't talk about this in advance, but when you said that, I thought that's something that I've seen over the years in terms of leadership, is that tension between big and small may not be the right, that's how I think about it. So.
I think that's a really good question. And I would answer it by attending to what's happening in here. And if the move toward moreness is life-giving and energizing for me, then I would maybe move into that role. If it feels like a burnout direction, if it feels like it's going to cause me to love them less, then I don't want to go there. So that's one of the, does that?
Yeah.
It's very much by attending to the interior.
Right, so for you there's an internal,
there's a kind of
spiritual
internal,
discernment.
yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
That's helpful for me too to think about.
Well, just, I mean, you get people want to call you into things, and it might not be your call.
Right.
And then you really have to think about it. It might not be the thing that you do well. And you can learn it. I mean, I learned Facebook against my will. I just want you to know. And I love it now. I'm a little addicted to it. I'm trying to get over that part of it. But that was a call to become. There was a big. I mean, I had to become bigger with that because I am not about like, oh, I'm so great on the Facebook. Woohoo! It makes me sick, really, kind of. So, but that was a good example of having to learn something that I didn't want to learn that required a certain like stepping into the unknown. That it turns out isn't really bad, but a small piece, but something necessary to our communication right now. I have a great person who put the Facebook thing together, and she runs it, and I put stuff on when I can. So.
I think also there's the practical concern: is this mission critical for our congregation? But I'm glad you brought out the interior piece, because I think that often is not talked as much about, but is so important. So I think you're right. The communications at this point are mission critical. Need to move forward.
They are.
Good. We got other questions?
Oh yeah.
All right.
First, the second book that you mentioned, we had a few people ask.
The Great Permission, an asset-based field guide for congregations, published by the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Call Augsburg Fortress.
You know what I think we can do with all of the books that you have is we'll put together a little list and we can post it and send it out to everybody. That'll probably be helpful.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. And this was interesting. You guys talked about burnout from other people, and then you talked about all the things that you do. How do you self-care? How do you focus on self-care for yourselves when you are in this kind of position and you're doing so much and you're still trying to move forward?
Rest when I need to.
That's a really hard question. And I'm always learning. And I tend to listen to my community. They sometimes know more when I need to rest than I do. And I'm really good at just plugging and plugging and plugging. One of the really great things I did, I want to recommend this for any pastors listening. I went back and did CPE. I did, all pastors are required to do something called clinical pastoral education. And it's a kind of tune-up for pastoral skills, a lot of which includes learning kind of how to balance work and self and family and all those things. So that was a really useful thing. I did it after 10 years of being a pastor, and it made a huge difference in my capacity to work more effectively, I would say. So there's very great things out there, but I do retreats, I do prayer. I go for walks on the beach. I park my car by the side of the road. Go to tea.
I definitely could spend more time. Like we were talking earlier, there's a little tea house near me, and I said, boy, I should just go there and drink tea more often. I don't make that kind of time just to waste time very often, but I struggled a lot early in my ministry about self-care, and I think I've made a number of strides so that I at least do waste some time, because that is absolutely the most important thing to regenerate, is to just, for me it feels like wasting time, but it's really so regenerative to have unstructured time where I'm not cleaning something or accomplishing something, or the retreat that Anne led that I went on. I can't tell you, I had about inspiration for about 6 sermons just from a 24-hour silent retreat. So I'm going to shut up and do that more often.
One of the books I brought is called Imagining the Small Church, Celebrating a Simpler Path. Part of self-care is, again, the question that Julie asked about what's essential, what's necessary. And sometimes one of the things that this author says, that the loveliness of being in a small church is you do have space to actually do self-care that connects you more deeply with your context and with the people. So just walking around the neighborhood, which I love to do, or walking with, there's just something about the simplicity that lets you do more self-care, I think, than in a more complicated parish. I mean, you can make ministry as complicated as you want. That is the truth. There is endless, you can work 24 hours and still not get it all.
Would you both also say that your work, your call, your ministry somehow is also feeds you?
Absolutely.
Of course.
I love this work.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Do you feel seminaries are preparing future leaders for these kinds of positions in smaller congregations?
It's been a while since I was in seminary. I graduated in 95.
Well, I've gone and back. I go back.
Oh, good.
Maybe go back and
you
check
go ahead
things
and
out.
address this.
I think they're, yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people are connected to their seminaries still, but I'm pretty connected to LTSP, Lutheran Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, and there's seminaries in the Boston area. I think the whole context of ministry is changing, and I think seminaries know that, and they're trying to address it. I love the younger pastors that we have in our synod. They are wonderful. They're so much fun. They're so alive. They're so, they're just great. You're one of them.
Younger.
Well, younger than me. You know, I mean, I feel like the people that are coming out of the schools are so, I mean, they're just really alive, and that's a wondrous thing. So I would say if they're an example of what seminaries are producing, yes.
Okay.
Long answer. Sorry.
We like long answers. I have two questions that are more on the negative side, but I think they're kind of important too. Do you find that effective small churches might be more effective as one large church?
I think there are obvious advantages to larger churches.
Are they saying that like you would like bring a bunch of small ones together to make a large one? Is that
I think so,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, you would have economies of scale. Instead of, you know, a community of 160 people that are your baptized membership using the one copier and the computer system and the building and the utilities, you have more people that use those same resources, right? So the per person cost, the more people you have, goes down. I think the experience changes. One of the chapters in this book, the one I talked about before, the Indispensable Guide for Smaller Churches, talks about if you have a congregation of, say, 20 or 25, they talk about the interrelationships between those two people, and everybody knows everybody else at that level. And what happens to that 25 when it grows to the next level of 40, and what happens when it goes to the next level of 70, and the next level, and they line it out just a little bit about how the relationships become more superficial. And that people who join smaller congregations generally join because they're looking for community. Yeah. They don't choose it because of the programs, because we don't have that many. Right. They choose it because when they come, they are known and accepted, and they don't have to work real hard at being known. So I think it's a different animal. So I think larger churches have to work really hard to do what smaller churches do naturally. So as far as being viable, yes, there's a real argument, financially viable, there's a real argument for having churches come together. But I also think there are other options besides simply consolidation. And I think partnership is really huge. In East Hartford, I wish Bill Peterson were here with his congregation, but they have, I think, 3 other worshiping congregations that use their building, and I think he said 12 support groups in East Hartford that use their building. So they're finding ways to partner. So I think you can leverage some of the relationships that you end up building in the community to find ways of supporting yourself financially that might mean you can continue to be a smaller congregation and yet still financially viable.
And then on sort of the flip side, the other direction there, what would make you finally decide to close doors if you were in that kind of position where things were, trending really downwards?
This is somebody who's actually thinking about it.
Which is why I'm not saying names.
So this is a really good question. I think, again, you would need to go to what people are feeling and how, the reality is that things do have lifespans, and even churches have lifespans. Mm-hmm. And the reality is also that there is resurrection. Mm. And letting something die while having the vision that that is not the final word is really important when it comes to closing the doors of the church, because those people aren't going to go away. Those hungers, that faith is not going to go away. It will reshape itself because it has a life that isn't grounded in our decision making. It's grounded in God, and it's grounded in the risen Christ. And I think you have to believe that when you're thinking about closing. I really do. But if people are coming away depressed and it's sad and it's already grieving, it's sort of like if you've ever taken care of an elderly parent, we all have had that experience of the long lingering death. And sometimes we don't actually need to go through that. With churches, we can make decisions about how to move into a different life, which brings me to my main point I want to make. Is that all right? Which is the imaginative vision of other ways of being. And I take that from the history of my own church, which had to reimagine itself. St. Paul has been there 125 years, and it's been in many different forms over that 125 years. It has not always looked the way it has. The building was a Universalist building. At one point, it was a communist meeting hall. Now it is a Lutheran church. There were 3 different Lutheran congregations. They came together. They lost some people. They kept some people. They went from speaking Finnish to English. They were 300 or 400 members in the 60s. Now we're about 200 members, 150 active, and 70 to 80 inches on a church. We didn't close the doors, but they changed. And it's because of this capacity to vision past where they were, including the decision they had to make in 2000 of whether they were going to stay alive or not. Yes, we want to live. Okay, so let's do some surgery. But it was very much this capacity to have vision. And my 2 books are both about that. Whoops. This always happens. It happens in church on Sunday during the sermon. It goes flying.
That's what makes your worship space a wonder.
This is called Tomorrow's Child, and this is by a wonderful, wonderful poet and philosopher named Rubem Alves. And he talks about this, what hope consists of is this visionary capacity to see beyond the present moment and to live for the hope of what you cannot see, which I just love.
That it?
Oh, no, we'll have questions.
Okay, so I can get rid of my script. We'll just go with the questions.
This, I think, is interesting. What are the factors that a smaller congregation might consider when they're deciding between a part-time versus a full-time pastor?
Interesting question.
The first thing that springs to my mind is, what kind of dollars are you working with? I think also, too, what level of involvement and ownership do the people who are currently involved have? Will there be, if you have a part-time minister, a decrease in the amount of ministry that's able to happen if you don't have that full-time person? What kind of gifts are in the community besides financial that might make it possible to have a really vibrant ministry that's part-time?
Do you think that either of you could do this work part-time and still have the, for lack of a better word, impact that you have?
I did work part-time in Naugatuck at Salem, and I was 20 hours a week, and I was driving about 45 minutes to get there. So it was critical that there were partners for me, and I had a great secretary in place, and that made a huge difference. And I had a really great lay leader who was also one of the finance people. And so in partnership with those 2 team players, I could get enough done to kind of keep things moving forward and pose a lot of questions that eventually help them to think through their situation. But I found myself wanting to do more. There's just many things that I couldn't do. And I was sort of like lightning. I'd be there on a Wednesday and I'd make about 4 visits, and I'd teach confirmation class, and I don't remember what else, but it was a lot at one time.
I worked part-time, but not as an ordained pastor. I worked part-time as a campus minister, and I really, really enjoyed it, but I felt limited by being part-time. The strength of having lay leaders and good staff is really important at St. Paul. That's another part of what makes a small church effective is your lay leadership and your support staff. We're lucky enough that I have a half-time staff person who is also a member of the parish who does far more than she should. Joanne, I hope you're listening, but we all love you. So, but she, people do a lot. I could not work the job that I have part-time. Okay. Not to do it the way I would want to do it. And I would be willing to be paid much less, and I would still probably work part-time. Full-time. That's a reality.
Don't tell. Your church council didn't.
No, I always try to.
We'll take that out in post.
But you can get rid of that.
No, we can't. This is called law.
No, I love my work. I love my work, and I don't see it happening part-time.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it would have been tough as a first call person to do it part-time.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think that I could do what I did part-time because I did have 8 years of parish experience prior to that.
By the way, Joanne Wilhelm says thank you. You mentioned stewardship a little bit, and maybe if you could both expand a little bit on how you make stewardship work, if there are any innovative ideas you might have for how to do it with a small, base of people.
And I want to add to it, not only innovative, but maybe the tried and the true, because sometimes we think we need to do something innovative, but in reality, maybe not. Maybe there's some consistent way.
Do you want to go first?
I'll go first. Stewardship was a huge issue when I came to St. Paul because that was the question of whether they were going to be able to be viable or not. So they had some very strong leaders in stewardship who had a sense of the history of the parish, that when people are clear about being asked clearly to give to a certain level, that they would in fact do that. So having a clear goal was really important. Having a clear request was important. Having the urgency of we need this in order to function this way. We are very much, we kind of have a balance between, we try to fund a vision, but we mostly fund the budget, But we've expanded quite a bit over the years, so we in fact have funded the vision over time. And I would say we had very strong leaders when I got there, and they continued to lead strongly, and they and that has morphed into some new strong leaders. And I have it tends to be key leaders in parishes, in small parishes. It tends to be key persons who lead both by vision and passion and example. And we've been lucky to have that. And we have some very, very generous parishioners.
Great.
I think I have kind of a twin approach. One is to educate the congregation about how much money it takes to run the ministry,
Right.
how the money is used, and what the distribution among the members is. We have 2 families that are giving over $10,000 a year. So I want people to know that there are some gifts per year that are of that magnitude. And I also want them to know that 40 households are doing $20 a week. I want them to see the spread. Right. So, and I also want them to know how many dollars per head it is per person to come in the door. If it costs $40 for, 65 people to worship for our size ministry, they need to know that every week. That's what it costs per head in my congregation to run these ministries. So you kind of paint a picture for them a little bit about the finances. But at the same time, my approach to stewardship is very much a gratitude, sort of great permission-esque way of approaching it, because really, we have everything we need to do the ministry in this place.
Right.
So it's just a matter of us figuring out what it is that we are meant to give, both of ourselves and resource-wise. So this past year we had so much fun because we found these little silver chalices from when they used to do individual communion, and these are like little silver cups. So our stewardship theme was "My Cup Runneth Over," and we had all these people come forward to share about how their cup runneth over in worship. Somebody had a song, and different people talking. I had a yoga teacher talk about breathing with us. And it was just really cool the way people grabbed a hold onto this whole gratitude theme. And that was how we did stewardship this year. We still had pledges, and we still drew up a budget afterward. Actually, we're drawing up the budget even as this happens, but we're pledging in about October, and budget is finalized in December. So they're not so close together. So I think a low-key approach to the actual getting of money is kind of important because it models our trust that, yes, this will all work out. God will provide. Through your pocket. Bishop?
Yes, ma'am.
We still have it.
You do? We do. We still have a little cups.
Wonderful.
We gave them away as keepsakes.
Oh, nice.
So everybody got one.
beautiful.
So you also, though, in both of what you were saying, you make it fun.
Fun is important.
No, the leaders we have made it so much fun.
Good.
So
yeah.
interesting. So
So it's not like stewardship.
No,
yeah, you're right.
No, it's
Gotta have
really we're always waiting to see what the new theme's going to be. She starts thinking about it. The current stewardship leader starts thinking about it. You know, as soon as she's finished with one, she goes on vacation and comes back with a new idea. So she's, you know, you have people that are called to it, and that was the way with the people before. They were really called to it.
Good.
Couple of quick hit questions. Average age of your members?
Golly, I don't know.
What's the range?
Ballpark?
Like,
Yeah.
Ballpark. I want to say between 45 and 60. We have a goodly number of families. I actually lost this year 6 very elder members, just 1, 2, 3 right after each other. So this whole, I've buried a generation since I've been there, and there's younger folks coming up. I'd say between 45 and 60.
Okay.
I would think that's the same for us too.
Okay. Do you have a vacation Bible school? Do you do it at all?
We don't. We do a reading program in the summer, 1 day a week.
Okay. Do you have more than one worship service? And I'm going to extend that. Have you considered anything like that?
I do a really strange worship service on Wednesday nights. It's called Night Church, and it's a combination of biblical reflection and then communion. It's discussion and communion. And it's like 10 people maybe.
We have a really tiny sanctuary. When you're at 80, you're starting to feel kind of crowded in there. We were worshiping in the 70s, and we thought about adding another service, an identical service. But when you start to talk those kind of numbers, you might be, instead of getting all new people, you might be splitting 70 into 35 and 35, or worse yet, 20 and 50. So people were not that interested in adding another worship service. Some were thinking about it, others were pretty against it, and now our worship numbers are not quite so high, so we feel pretty comfortable. So that's where we're at right now. We do like a summer midweek service, and of course in Lent.
Okay. Going back a little bit to Sunday school, do you do background checks on your teachers? Anything like that?
We have not.
All our teachers have background checks because they're all teachers.
Oh,
So
actual
they're actual teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
But we can do it, and I think that's something we're moving towards. We were. This is one of the challenges. Can I talk about this? Of being a small church is kind of thinking about policies. It's very interesting. So
it's a different dynamic.
It's a different and we have talked about Safe Church for many years. We actually I had a group of people do Safe Church training. I've been kind of immersed in it. We looked at different policies, and we were waiting for the Synod's policy to come out, which did come out in the last year. So we're moving into being more like that. And people are very savvy about safety, and they want to see that become a kind of policy.
But it's really interesting when you say that, because earlier you said relational. It's
It
all
is,
relational.
it is.
Because it's so relational,
Yeah.
to then do an overlay of a bureaucratic policy
it's very
approach.
hard. Yeah.
Those are two different.
It's very
People
hard.
do resist it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
feel like you're not trusting them somehow, when really we're putting this in place to protect them also.
Yes.
And we are just adopting a Safe Church policy too, so that these things are in the works, but not. It's hard, we talked about it with counters. Two unrelated adults should be counting,
Yes.
but we have couples, and so I was just coming in like, we got to rearrange this. And they're saying, look, we just moved from only having one couple do all the counting.
Right.
Now we've got 7 teams, and some of them happen to be couples. We can't do this any other way. We don't have the human resources to always have 2 unrelated adults counting. So I had to back off.
Right. Yeah.
Have you used grants at all to supplement your income? And maybe if you could talk about where you got them if you did?
I have not.
I have not either.
Okay.
Sounds like a good idea.
Actually, the counting thing makes me want to ask this next question. Do you have any other paid staff, such as office workers, music ministers? What are their hours like?
We have a paid parish administrator who works 4 days a week. It's 20 to 25 hours, I would say. She often works more than she should, but she likes doing that. And we have a paid music director, and we have a paid custodian. The music director is maybe 12 hours a week.
Yeah, we're the same, though. Our musician is paid per week, and I'm thinking she has 4 hours or so of preparation to practice. There's no choir. She will accompany it if anybody brings music. Very agreeable. And the custodian, 5 to 10 hours a week. So I do 20-hour-a-week secretary who's been my personnel committee, and I hired her recently. It's been a great hire, so that's been wonderful. Really helps.
And you talked about, I believe your congregation used to be very large and then got smaller. Was that?
I would say in the 60s, this is in the history,
Yep.
In the 60s and 70s, there were 400 some people on the books, and they had a lot of people worshiping. And so I know this is like from 1960 to maybe 1973. The history after that's a little fuzzy. When I got there, there were 459 baptized members. I don't know where I buried a few of them. Actually,
there were 459 names on a book somewhere, but there were not 459 people.
I pretty much stripped the rolls, and I went, and it dropped back to 159 people that I could know and identify, and we're about 200 now. So, but again, it's between 70 and 80, whereas before it was between 50 and 60. Now it's 70 and 80. And that, which brings me to a question about membership. I don't want to talk about it right now. If we have time, maybe later. So.
We're kind of over, so that's why I wanted to run through the questions.
And you talked about Facebook. Do you guys use social media to build reputations? This is the actual question. To help build reputations within your community. So I think maybe the larger community. Do you do that at all?
Now that's a really interesting question. I want to hear how you both have to answer it, because the question is, have you used social media to build your reputation? My guess is the answer is no. You have not used social media to build your reputation. You built the reputation in the ministry, and then you've used social media as a way to communicate about it.
We're just getting started with social media, so I think we're just trying to connect with our members at the moment. Although I did notice who's using it, and one of the people that we're praying for on our prayer list is a child and her mom tuned into our Facebook page, and it's really nascent. So it's clearly a way to connect beyond your borders.
Okay.
I think whatever you said. You could repeat what you said.
I'm sorry to jump in on that. I should have let you guys just answer it, because I hear it so much, and as you know, I'm a big advocate of using social media, but so often the question is phrased that way, as if social media is the way you build a reputation, and I just don't think that's not the cart before the horse. You build a reputation by doing the ministry, and you use social media to communicate about the ministry. It's the other way around.
It's just another tool.
Exactly, it's another tool.
Yeah, I think of it as a communication tool.
Yeah.
So.
What else do we have here? This has been here for a while, and I meant to get to it earlier. How have you both engaged your congregational leadership and community to join in mission? Now that's an enormous question, but
the local
leadership and the community.
The church community or beyond?
Both. But I think specifically your leadership, and then also the community, the wider community.
To join in mission.
Yeah.
What kind of partnerships have you sought out?
And you have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. The interfaith community in Gloucester started a day center together for drop-in people who are in crisis, drop-in, and it's actually itinerant. It goes from church to church. Our church is on the other side of town, but the churches downtown have opened up their doors to receive people in crisis during the day. one long fellowship hour run by volunteers that came out of a conversation that we had one Thanksgiving among 3 of us. What can we do for the increased homelessness that's happening in Gloucester? And this beautiful thing came down from heaven like a bride, and it's called the Grace Center. So that was a huge partnership. So it's interfaith, it's staffed by volunteers from all the different churches, and from the temple and from a Buddhist community. So that was a really wonderful partnership. We have partnership in the Open Door and the food ministry and things like that. But that was a wonderful example of engaging the whole community to serve the community.
Mm. And I would say that among the people that were already present in the congregation when I came, there are a number who are already serving in all kinds of capacities in the community. We have some really involved people in the town of Newington. So they've helped to bring us along a little bit and get us involved in some initiatives. For example, I have a guy who works on the Memorial Day Parade, and our church is like the place where the parade begins. So there's some years that people hand out bottled water. Other years there's been an effort to welcome people and just to use the bathrooms, you know, so they have a place. So, you know, those kinds of concerns can be lifted up and engaged.
That's it? Okay. Anything else? Because it's about 10 after 8, which the networks will excuse us for chiming in on the Bruins game. I think is there a Bruins game tonight, Andy? Would you know anything about that? Anything that you'd want to add that we did not touch on? And
just 2 other books. Alice Mann has written a couple of different books about church size. This one is the In-Between Church, Navigating Size Transitions and Congregations. So I recommend those reads for anyone doing small church ministry or other. And then for breaking through some of the clickiness of small churches, this is a great resource written by my parents. From Here to Community, it is a study or a small group offering that looks at community, not only how communities have faith communities are different than other kinds of communities and how they function historically, but also what you can do to connect more with the community beyond your faith community. So it's a really great resource.
There's a website that goes?
Yes, lifecrossings.com.
Okay. So, Judy, you can send me the $50 for that free plug.
I just have one thing to say. The thing that drew me into ministry was the invitation to love others deeply, to love God deeply, and to love others. And the thing I love about serving in a small church is that I actually love them. And I think the context allows for that kind of deep love to happen. And I'm so grateful for that.
If I can just ask by way of closing, can you talk about what your hopes, dreams, and goals are for where you want your congregations to go?
I keep wanting to share the ministry, you know, to provide whatever opportunities to really connect with the kind of work that I get to do by virtue of my calling, you know. So whenever I can share the scriptures and foster that engagement with the story, I love that. I love worshiping with the people and involving them. These hands-on opportunity to serve alongside others in the community, you know, to know each other's souls. That's all great. We started a visitation ministry. People are eating that up. Any ways that can further that. And so I'm always looking for them. But being a small church, we can take kind of one thing on at a time. So we go along in God's time with that kind of stuff.
I would second that. I think to share the ministry more deeply and thoroughly, and to see people grow into their faith and love of God. And it's really wonderful when it happens. And the more of that, the more exciting the work is. Good.
Well, this has been great. Thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. And so this is concluded. You can go watch the Bruins game or NCIS or whatever it is, or maybe you can open your Bibles and read a scripture passage and reflect on that.
1 Corinthians 12.
1 Corinthians 12. All right. Bye-bye.